So in preparing for today's discussion, I thought, what could be the most valuable thing I could share with you? I could talk to you about the really cool stack we have in place for enterprise data lake. I could talk to you around what we're doing around enterprise security and how we're managing log data in that environment, etc. And I thought the most important and insightful thing I can share with you is actually what our journey has been to get to success in this environment, because it's not an easy road. This is some comments from EY, fortunately not McKinsey or KPMG, otherwise we'd have to rewrite the presentation. And even though the commentary is specific to financial services, the points that are made are applicable to every industry. A couple of months ago, The Economist front page, data is the new oil. But what does it mean? And there's really 2 points here that are quite important, and we've tried to imbibe this into our own organization. The first is the factors of production in the digital era are now different. It used to be people, process, and technology. It's now people, process, technology, and data. And the other component of this equation is that to the extent that in your organizations and in our organizations, data is perceived as a technical thing, something IT worries about. We'll be great at analytics one day, but that's not part of what's important for us right now. That doesn't correlate. And that plays out in this, that Gartner's prediction that more than 80% of every single big data undertaking worldwide will fail. More than, not South Africa, not somewhere else, globally, more than 80% of every big data undertaking will fail. We've got a very successful big data implementation. So let me share with you part of what we've been through to get to that point. Because there's key lessons here for all of us, and I hope you'll be able to take some of this out and be successful in your own organizations. Because our goal is not to selfishly be successful in our corner and the space in which we play. We all have a direct contribution to make to building up our country, building up the industry that we operate in, and making sure that Africa is ready for the 4th industrial revolution. Africa is often called the quantum continent, that we have this ability to leapfrog, so let's do that. This is also a really poignant image, and I don't know how many of you recognize it. This is from the cover of The Economist from 2010. So this is almost 8 years ago now. And the title of this, the front cover, was The Data Deluge. And this was in 2010. This was before we've had this explosion of data that's propagating now. And what's the story here? The story here is that data is all around us. The challenge is, how do we harness that data in a productive context? In our organization, I often use the analogy that if you had the misfortune of being shipwrecked at sea, you're surrounded by water, and what's the one thing that you need? Water. And this is often the problem with data in our organizations. It's all around us, it's everywhere. How do we use this and construct this in a meaningful manner? And even though the failure rate around this is high, it's not a simple journey. It's becoming easier, but there's varying complexities. This is absolutely essential to every single organization. Why? So in financial services, if we measure the different components that are critical to us, how we engage with our customers, our journey around customer centricity and personalization, our back office and middle office processes, how we work with people in our organization, across every dimension that data affects in terms of the availability of data, the scope of that data. So historically, data was very federated, would sit in silos. Now to get meaningful insight, what do we need to do? We have to bring data from across the organization together. It's not as simple as give me this extract from this application, I'll run this analytics on my laptop, and we're done. That's not the way the world works anymore. We need a very, very integrated view. The frequency of data. Somebody was making the comment earlier that the one thing that we can predict with absolute accuracy is that everything becomes faster. The speed at which we need to respond, make decisions on the fly becomes really important. And everything has to be automated because we can't do this through hydraulics. We need full automation into this process to deal with this complexity. So in Standard Bank Group, what we've tried to do is really infuse data into everything that we do. And we've got really great executive sponsorship from board level, the Standard Bank Group board, our individual country boards, our excos, into this is going to be how we differentiate ourselves as a proposition going forward. The first is, and these 7 elements talk to key areas of focus that all require different emphasis at different points in time, but it needs to be tackled holistically. The first is, how do you utilize, monetize, and exploit data in your own organization? Why is data valuable for you? It's one thing saying we're sitting on this gold mine of data, why is nobody mining it? Well, why is it valuable for you as an organization? Everybody talks around data as an asset. Well, do you treat it as an asset in your organization? That's a very telling question in all organizations. What is the architecture required to govern this? So one of the unique attributes of data is that it has the ability to break down silos. We can generate insight and create views out of data that ordinarily wouldn't have been possible if we just stick to product, segment, channel, whatever, however we slice and dice these particular views in our organization. But if we don't find a way to bring data together in a unified manner, we just repeat those silos in our data. Everybody is, most people would be familiar with Conway's law, that the product of what you're creating and how you execute is really a mirror of the communication structures in your organization. If you don't find a way to alter that, you're going to be on an uphill battle. Capability. So in this journey, you're going to be very strategic around what are the capabilities that you need to be successful. Everybody's spoken around data science. As Standard Bank Group, we've sponsored the first ever honors program around big data and analytics at Wits University. We've got a substantial investment in engineering capabilities because nobody's going to solve these problems for us. At the southern tip of Africa, we learn to be self-sufficient. We tap into partners, we work with people who can help accelerate our journey, but we've got a commitment to build deep capability around things that are strategically important. What's the operating model around data? How do you work with data in your organization? Who takes responsibility for what, and what's the cohesion that you've got to create around this environment? And that talks fundamentally to the culture. The culture, and we can talk open source. Open source is fundamentally more than the technology, it's around the culture of how we work. It's this mentality and outlook of let's pay it forward. I have something to contribute. How do I do this in a way that other people will benefit from it? Because otherwise we can continue and we'll have some marginal success around data to really be able to exploit and fully harness. The culture associated with that becomes massively important. And then there's the infrastructure associated with that, which you've heard a lot about today. And then investment management. You've got to be really critical and clinical as to what do you invest in? What are the things that you choose not to invest in at this point? What are the most important things? There's a great quote that says, in life, you can have anything, you just can't have everything. And that's part of the trade-off that you have to make in this environment. We've also got a set of guiding principles, almost our operating philosophy around how we work with data in our organization. And these are really simple, pragmatic steps that read very easily. The implementation of this is hard because there's always contention. Everybody's fighting for their piece, their component of the P&L, and you've got to bring this together in a universal context. First is follow the value. If you don't have a use case-driven approach, you're going to end up with a platform that nobody's going to use. It's like Sanrail with e-tolls. It's built, nobody pays. You're written off the debt. Don't make that your big data journey. You have the opportunity to change it. So be very specific around how you're going to extract value out of this, and what is the scale at which you need to invest, and the pace at which that needs to grow. The second is, it has to add value to customer. So even if you're doing it in a back office context, data optimization, storage optimization, find a way to link that back to the customer. If we're able to do that more successfully in our organizations, we'll have a lot more traction, and it moves away from being this technical thing, this IT thing, this thing that people will tell me when it's ready and I'll know what to do. It moves away from that construct. We've made a substantial or we've undertaken a substantial journey across our organization around what we call new ways of work. And it's really around adopting the principles around agile, working in cross-functional teams so that it's not just IT developers working with a tester. Where's the DBA? Where's the business people? Where's the analysts? Where's the marketing people? Where's the data scientists into this equation? How you bring that together? And that's been a really great success story for us as an organization. I mean, we're the largest reference site around agile at scale anywhere in the Southern Hemisphere. And then we've spoken around prudent IT investment, that this is, again, something you've got to manage quite carefully. And you also recognize that this is an environment that changes quite substantially. So we've got a global architecture because we operate across 22 different geographies, but local execution, because if you don't find a way to connect ownership and accountability for data, you end up, your data lake becomes a data swamp. So this is another great quote that I like. And it's specifically poignant around this journey, that obstacles do not block the path, they are the path. Because we rarely get the opportunity to build things out from first principles. What you have here is the ability to press the reset button largely around how data works in your organization and use this opportunity to build that out differently. Because the technology has shifted. There's been a quantum leap from mainframe to relational databases, and now you've got distributed computing. How do you harness that in your organization? And it's not easy, but there's value to be realized in that. And some of the things to watch out for. So the first is data governance. So the number one issue of data in any organization is, can I trust this data? Where does this data come from? If you're building a data lake and the source of your water is polluted, don't expect that people are going to continue to buy off your environment. So the governance component and being able to create trust, clear ownership of data, who's accountable for that, who can use what becomes really important. The second, and we've heard a great talk around security in boardrooms everywhere, what's the number one operational risk? Cyber. Don't get caught with your pants down in this environment. You've got the ability to do things differently here. But it is inherently complex. And you've got to tie in the ecosystem around it. So we run our big data environment of a Linux platform. Part of the authentication of that platform means you've got to Kurberize that environment. So you Kurberize your Hadoop stack. But then you've got to Kurberize every tool that integrates with that Hadoop stack. And suddenly, the complexity associated with this becomes far more than you may have initially imagined. So that's something really to bear in mind, because it covers from what's the auditability of your environments? Who has access to what? What are the logical access groups that you create into this environment? How do you administer your platform? How do you deal data protection? These are not simple topics, and you've got to be very clear in your organizational position and philosophy around this. Then there's data accessibility and the quality of that. Because you can have all the data in the world, and we've got a saying in our team that better data always trumps better math. And what that means is some things you can't create through an algorithm. Sometimes you've got to be very intentional in your design. What data do you need to create in order to get to this outcome? That's part of data accessibility. Some of the data that you need may be sitting in different pockets of the organization, in different formats. How do you make that accessible? So in our organization, we're working with the concept of curated data sets. That, yes, we've got this, and an example would be our card environment. One system in our card environment, and we have a host of applications, one system has 10,000 elements. How would you as a data scientist, no matter how brilliant you are, work with 10,000 elements? And that's just one system. We run thousands of applications. The ability to identify what are the most important things, and off that, because if you had to go and define the metadata, the lineage, the classification, the taxonomy, apply data quality and profiling to 10,000 elements, for one system, we're provisioning data of hundreds of applications, forget it. What are the most critical elements used? And that's what we call our curated data sets. Of that 10,000, I've now identified this 127 is the one that needs a high level of governance, and it drives 80% of the output. That becomes really important. And then there's data ops. So everybody wants to be a data scientist, and everybody wants to build a model. Who's going to run your models? Who's going to ingest this data every single day? What are the non-functionals that you're going to build into your model design that you're productionizing? So if you're running a model on a real-time basis, and that feed drops for 10 minutes. What do? Do you rerun that data? Do you stop? If that's a fraud transaction, do you want to run that data and call a customer after the transaction's completed? What do you do? The dynamics around this become really important. And it also talks to the point I mentioned earlier around the criticality of automation in this environment. Because if you're running, depending on your environment, you may end up with hundreds of models. How do you manage that? How do you govern that? A data source changes. What's your process to now apply that downstream for something you're running on a real-time basis into production? These are things that you've got to grapple with. And then there's technical drift. So we're all in love with open source. The challenge associated with that is the pace at which open source is moving is typically faster than people can keep up. So if we've seen Nick was presenting earlier, Hadoop 2.5, Hadoop 2.8, Hadoop 3.0, and data plane, how are the people in your organization who are responsible for extracting value from these environments going to keep up? This becomes a really important question for you to answer in your organization, and it talks to the construct, it talks to the mix of skills that you have, and how we find and keep people relevant. And the last is skills. We have to make a sustainable contribution to building the skills that we want. You're not going to import these skills. It doesn't matter how many people you want to get from India or anywhere else to come and do this. You're going to get to the point where there's a certain level of critical mass of skills you need in your own organization. Build those skills. You're not going to find them anywhere else. You're going to have to build those skills yourself. And it's possible. We started our journey. Nobody knew Hadoop. Nobody knew what Hadoop was. But you find people with the right orientation, people with the learning agility, and in teamwork, then magic can happen. So that's my last slide. Thank you.